Welcome to Prime Time, a show for adults in the prime of life. My name is Susan Hoskins, the director at PSRC, the Resource Center for Older Adults and Their Families. Today, my guests are Cathy Pope and Tom Wells, and we're going to be talking about home modifications that you can make to age in place. So let's start out first talking about what do we mean when we say aging in place?
Go ahead, Cathy.
Well, aging in place is essentially being able to stay in your home for as long as you want, as long as it's safe, and as long as you feel comfortable living independently in your home. Mm-hmm. I am a certified age in place specialist, which was a designation created by the Home Builders Association. And that, I'm trained to look at the unique needs that people have as they age, and how do we modify homes to take care of those needs so that people can remain in their home.
Okay. So from your perspective in the construction industry, it's having a particular eye to looking at what kinds of things can be done in the home to make it safer, make it more functional for people who have those needs for modification. And from our perspective, we know that studies show that 87% of people want to stay in their own homes.
Exactly.
And one of the big barriers to that is often not having hallways that are wide enough, not having bathrooms on the first floor, having stairs with no railings, or all kinds of things like that create barriers. And in our talking before, and Tom, as the person who has owned Thomas G. Wells Construction and worked in the business for a long time, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you came to this interest?
We've been in the remodeling business for over 23 years. And so we've had lots of different types of interactions with our clients that have to do with making their home more livable, let's just call it that. And age in place is a little bit of a term that makes us think this is for older people, like my parents, for example, when they decided at age 70 and 68 that they were going to live in their home forever. My father is now passed away at the age of 93, and my mother's 88, and they have been, my mother still lives at home. So, I could see it from my own personal point of view about how their house had to be adapted so that they could use it. But we shouldn't forget that families have children with special needs, or like I was coaching soccer with my daughter for a long time, and one of our players broke her leg, and so suddenly she has a short-term need for a home that's more accessible. So really it's making our homes accessible for any person in the family of any age for the time that they're actually living in the house. And
I think it's one of the things that new home builders don't always think about is the need for that kind of accessibility throughout the lifespan. And you see houses that have 5 steps up to the front door.
Exactly.
That, other than that, it would be fine.
Yeah.
But there are just those things that do become barriers. We have a friend with a child with cerebral palsy and in an electric wheelchair.
Sure,
and
exactly.
a neighbor who had a stroke in her 50s and, again, is in a power wheelchair. And how they've adapted their living environments, sometimes with continued challenges.
Sure, of course.
Well, it's funny because even some of the over 55 communities have stairs going up into the entry, and you wonder what people were thinking, because that is one of the things that we try to do, is make sure it's an easy entry into the house and decrease any kind of level changes. There's all sorts of things.
And I know just from pushing a wheelchair that sometimes just the lip
just a little bit of difference,
can make a difference, especially
if
because you want a person to be able to do as much for themselves as possible.
Absolutely.
So if you're mobilizing around in a wheelchair, but you just can't make it over that 1-inch bump that they've put in between rooms, can make a big difference. Wanting to go back to the aging in place, because I think that in our field, we also think of aging in place including continuing care retirement
Sure, of course.
communities, and as you say, 55-plus communities, that even though these are intentional communities for older adults, you're still living independently. You
Yeah.
still don't
Right.
have nursing care.
Yeah.
And I think the assisted livings are sort of in the middle. Most of the assisted living
Yeah.
communities at least are responsible for the repair, maintenance, upkeep. But people have a lot of independence, and there are small, not huge things that can be done that make a huge amount of difference. So let's go on to talk about what are, well, first let's talk about what you do, like how, I know that our social workers will go out, meet with a family. We have a checklist of home safety issues that include things like, you know, are there smoke detectors in the house
Right,
Right.
sure. There's
that
some
work,
basic,
and
basic, things that you
basic
have-
home
yeah.
safety kinds of things, but also looking at things like steps, railings, lighting in the home. So we go through that with the person, with the family, and identify some things, and then we want to encourage them to have somebody come and address the things that could compromise their independence, because our goal is to help people stay independent as long as possible.
course.
Right.
That means you have to address the things that could compromise that. So if we called you, what would happen?
Well, typically we would go out and meet with the family and get a sense of about what it is that they're trying to accomplish, or what kind of barriers or what kind of problems that they foresee that they're going to be having. So we do a lot of listening up front. We also do a walkthrough of the home to assess it from a feasibility point of view, for example. Because lots of different homes are, you know, all homes are very different. So if it's a 3-story walk-up as opposed to a ranch, I mean, there's different issues that have to do with that. And then we start to assess, you know, who's the person that we're trying to make this work for, although we know in the back of our minds that everybody in the house eventually is going to need some of these things all the time. And people benefit by certain things just by the fact that they're there. And here's an example. A lot of times, as people age, they need better lighting, and they need electrical switches in more convenient locations.
You don't want to walk across the
Sure.
room to
Or
turn
maybe,
the light on.
Or maybe the light switch is actually one of those ones that has the little light in it, so the switch is actually lit. So you can find it at midnight when you're going to the bathroom or something like that. So those are just convenience things that provide a safety feature, but also everybody in the home is going to benefit from that. The other thing that I wanted to just mention is that sometimes our homes are okay for us living in them, but they're not really accessible for people that we care about.
Yeah.
So maybe my grandmother can't come to my house anymore because she can't get up those 2 stairs, or because the bathroom's on the 2nd floor and she can't get up the stairs. So it's really important to think of the house not just as what we're living in and whether it's convenient for ourselves, but if it's convenient for the people that we care about so that they can be part of it. So once we've talked with the homeowners about the things that they need, then we sort of prioritize what could be done now or what needs to be done right away. Like, for example, your friend who might need a ramp built immediately, or maybe the front door has to be widened, or maybe a bathroom has to be put on the 1st floor, or a powder room made larger so that it could accommodate somebody who is using a wheelchair. So typically there are things that need to be done right away, and then there's some things that could be postponed and then done a little more into the future.
I know that sometimes you work with occupational therapists too.
Yes.
Cathy, can you talk a little bit about their role in this?
An occupational therapist is actually critical for some people. An occupational therapist has the ability to fill out all the forms, to work with Medicare. There's assistance available to people sometimes, and that occupational therapist is the route to getting to that person. Our company, for example, is contacting and possibly working with 2 occupational therapists right now. One that deals with the elderly, but the other one's a pediatric occupational therapist. So that brings to light again that notion that this is for everybody of all ages.
Yeah.
And yes, 7,000 baby boomers are turning, 7 million are
70.
7,000 are turning 65 every day.
Every day,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So this is coming, and this is a
In
good
spite
way
of the fact
to
that
plan.
boomers don't plan to get old.
Right,
Oh,
exactly.
we don't. Nobody
Yeah, I'm a
plans on
boomer. I'm not
that.
getting any.
And this will
Yeah.
make you not ever feel old. This
Right.
is
Yeah.
the thing.
Well, I think
It's-
that's a good
It's
point.
planning, and it's planning to make your life better and to be able to have everyone enjoy your home.
Well, I know that occupational therapists also work with people in rehab. Say somebody's
Sure, of
had a
course.
stroke and they're working to regain their function. The occupational therapist has a real eye towards mobility issues, but also quality of life and
Right.
getting back to
Yes.
all of those things.
Right.
So, you know, you're going to go home, you live alone, you're going to cook for yourself. What do we need to modify in the kitchen so that you can cook for
Yeah.
yourself? And I would guess that at that point, Tom, you might come in and lower a counter so that someone
Yeah,
can
absolutely.
work sitting in a chair
Yep.
or
Yeah, my mother is a good example of
Okay.
this. She still lives at home. She's 88 years old. My father passed away a few years ago. He died in bed, which was exactly the plan that they had for themselves. I think that the number one thing that we're concerned of, you know, being her children, but also I think she's concerned is, you know, she does not want to fall down
okay.
in the house because she might be alone and, you know, you might be lying there for, you know, a few hours before somebody comes by, or that's a really good way to break your hip or whatever. So making sure that people are safe moving around their house is, I think, the number one thing. And so being in a kitchen, you know, there have to be things that they can grab onto, like maybe a really sturdy chair or a better, you know, instead of a round doorknob, maybe a handle doorknob. We put discrete grab bars in different places that look more like towel bars, but they're actually strong enough to really hold somebody
Well, that's clever.
if, you know, if that were the case. And we changed where certain things were stored in kitchen cabinets, so she didn't have to reach up really high to get stuff or bend over.
No
to get
climbing
it up.
on stools.
Exactly, stuff
Exactly.
like that, yeah. So it's crucial to work with the person to see what it is that they're actually hoping to continue to do, and then in some cases, you know, encourage them not to do certain things, like my mother can't drive anymore. So, you know, there's certain things that we have to give up. But I think when my father was about 90, and still, he had Alzheimer's, so he was getting less and less able to communicate. But during those last few years when he was still really lucid, he said to me, you know what, the really frustrating thing about getting old is that a lot of the things that I could used to do for myself, I can't do anymore. Like, it was hard for him to get into a bathroom by himself. And part of the reason was that the doors were sort of narrow, right? And it was that sense of, you know, sort of the dignity of just doing the common things that we take for granted all our life, and then suddenly, wow, I can't do that anymore, and I need help. And not wanting to ask for help all the time. That was another thing that he was really... So by putting these grab bars around, or making the doors easy to open, or having lighting so he could actually see where he's going, those are the things that I think really made a big difference. And it made it more like he had always lived that way. It wasn't a problem being, you know, a little bit disabled.
And it's those things that preserve dignity. And I
Exactly.
think the whole
Exactly.
field of adaptive technology is growing. I get catalogs and
Oh, all the
emails
time.
and everything all the
It's
time.
huge.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's something that we're going to see
Yeah.
grow tremendously.
Yeah.
But I think of things like you were just talking about the showering. To
Mhm.
take out the old shower and tub,
Sure.
which is the hard thing to step over the
Right.
brim, and put in these wall-less tub
Mhm.
kinds of enclosures that you can roll into or just
Sure.
walk into, would
Mhm.
enable someone like your father to continue to shower on his
Exactly.
own.
Mhm.
And like you say, the grab bars, I know I visited a home and the person was grabbing onto the towel bar in the bathroom, and the knob of the casement window
Right,
in
yeah.
the bedroom.
Correct.
And so we put grab bars
Yeah,
in there,
exactly.
and
Mhm.
then a few months later put in a pole.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
you know, again, the occupational therapist came out, looked at some of
Sure.
those things, so he can continue to get in and out of bed on his own. And more recently, a stair lift has been
Sure,
installed
yeah, that's very
because they have a
common.
second floor apartment, which
Yeah.
was, I thought, the biggest challenge.
Mhm.
Well, back to that grab bar thing.
Yeah.
The thing to remember with people is when you are falling, everything is a grab bar. So everything in the shower, anything that's attached that could be grasped, part of what we do is to be sure everything is secure. Because when you are going down, it could be your shower
Curtain.
spray that you're
Curtain.
pulling on. everything
A lot of
has to
people
be
end up taking the curtain
secure.
down with them.
You know, one of the things that I think that people are concerned about when they start thinking about adapting their home is that it's going to look like a hospital. Like their home is now going to look very institutional. And I think that probably 5 or 10 years ago that was more the case because the products that were available, like grab bars or towel bars or shower stalls or even doorknobs and things like that, they came out of the hospital industrial industry. But those people inventing these kind of things, they know that the baby boomers are retiring. They know that there's a giant number of people who are going to be looking for products that really are very, very functional, very, very safe, and yet look just like the rest of the stuff in their house. So most lines of plumbing fixtures now, they have all kinds of stuff that really matches what you already have. So homes do not have to look institutional at all. They can look just exactly like what you would want a cozy, nice, attractive home, but it secreted around are these things that really make life a lot easier.
So you're talking about things that can work for an older person or a person who has a temporary need or a young person who has
Sure.
a disability
Exactly.
and they need that, but that it's also an investment in the future because it may be that somebody else in the family needs it later, or it may be a selling point when you come to sell the home, that this home is adapted for special needs. And one of the things that I run into a lot is adult children coming to me and saying, I'm worried about mom or dad living alone, like you might come to me with your mom and say,
We've
I'm
had
worried
2
about her
clients,
living in her own home, and I think she should come live with us. But I don't know how to make that work in my home. And so we deal with the interpersonal side of that. Is this a good match? Do you and your mom get along well
Sure.
enough? Can you and your mom share a kitchen? Or can your wife and your mom share a kitchen together? Or is that interpersonal dynamic going to work? But if you feel like it is and you want to make that commitment, what are the changes we would need to make in our home? Does it mean converting a den? Does it mean needing to add a bathroom? I know my husband's cousin did it, and it worked for about a month, but they had converted a den that didn't have a door, and so they
Right,
had a curtain
sure.
hung, and
Yeah.
it just
Yeah,
wasn't
privacy
enough
is really
privacy.
important,
It
yeah.
wasn't enough of a
Um,
boundary
yeah.
for them,
Yeah.
so they had to think about something else. But one of the conversations that I've had with them is about cost to these things.
Sure.
Home modifications are not without cost. And one of the things that I've encouraged some people to do is to think about the cost. Okay, are you going to spend mom's money or your money for skilled nursing care or assisted living care? Are you going to spend it? Can you spend that same money to adapt your home, and then you also get value from it?
Sure, of course.
A lot of family
Right.
caregivers don't get paid.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it
So convenience is important. as part of
right.
that.
So it's a way of increasing value there. Is that something you run into?
Yeah, absolutely. You want to talk about the legacy
Um,
benefit?
I think that's a very important concept because when you add up the thousands of dollars people sometimes pay for living in an assisted living or some kind of a place, if you took that money, and oftentimes elderly people, or they don't have to be elderly, people start to look to, what am I leaving my children? And if you balance out the possibility that I could be spending all of this money on this location, whereas maybe I could add on a room and a bathroom to my child's house, help them by paying for this with essentially what was the money that was going to rent you a room somewhere else. Now you have added to your children's home value. You've provided them a place in the future for when they are older. Everybody sort of benefits from this. It's
And you may find that everybody enjoys having a
Yeah.
bathroom on the
You-
first
Absolutely.
floor.
and that's absolutely true, because no matter what people say, there does come a time when you've got a sore knee or something, you don't want to go up those stairs.
Yeah.
And
Here's an example of that. I was talking with a gentleman whose wife died a few years ago, and he was living in a house over in Bucks County, and he realized that it was more of a house than he really wanted to take up at the time. He's about 70 years old now. And, he was discussing this whole situation with his daughter and his son-in-law, and they, because of the economy as the way it is, they were struggling a little bit. So he decided to renovate his garage into an apartment for himself, which has a little kitchen and its own bathroom, has a door which separates it from the rest of the house. And then his daughter sold her house and moved into,
The main part of the
the
house.
main part of the house. So now the grandchildren are around, and it's one big happy family again. But the kids are going to get the benefit of now this home when he passes away in a number of years. Then they'll have the home with the apartment. Maybe someday they'll move into the apartment and their own kids.
Exactly.
So in a way, it's passing down through generations the benefit that each generation can kind of pass on to the next one. It's becoming a much more common thing. I had a client of mine call me because their grandmother is considering moving in with them, and they were thinking about building an addition on the back of their house. They didn't want to give up the garage because they were using it for other things, but they thought if they could build a small addition on the back, that would accommodate her needs. So there's lots of different ways that houses can be reconfigured in order to accommodate the changing needs of a family.
And it's a wonderful way, as you said, to
Yeah.
bring the generations
Yeah,
back together
absolutely.
It
again.
is.
I think one thing that's important for people to remember when you go into this, too, that even though mom or dad or grandma appear frail,
Yeah,
they can stay frail for a long time. So
Oh, yeah.
don't go into this
Absolutely.
thinking, and I think that also makes some people afraid to invest very much. Well, it's only going to
Mhm.
be for 6 months.
Mhm.
But that 6 months can often stretch into 5
A long
years,
time, yeah.
8 years.
Exactly.
I work with caregivers who have been caregiving for people who had a stroke for 17, 18
Mhm.
years.
Sure.
So it really can be a good investment
Yeah.
in that. But you also have to be emotionally ready
Yeah.
to make that commitment
Yeah.
for an unknown
Yeah.
period of time.
Well, they call our generation, I'm a baby boomer, and they call our generation the sandwich generation because
Yes.
we're caring for our elderly parents, or we're thinking about them in a way that we maybe weren't 20 years ago when they were, out in their careers and everything. But we're also raising our children, and, so we have to balance these two different competing things. And sometimes it's actually easier to have our family living close by, because then we can all keep an eye on each other and we can all support each other, which is really, 3 or 4 generations ago, this was the typical way that Americans lived. We just expected to be taking care of our kids, taking care of ourselves, and having the older generations around. So in a way, I think it's really a beneficial thing. We're coming back to that sense of community, that sense of living as a unit, but and then being in the wider community as well.
It's a healthy thing for communities in general, because communities nowadays tend to be so homogenous. And you might have a neighborhood where literally everybody in the neighborhood's between age 35 and 49. And when people of all ages live together, it's just a healthier atmosphere. It's you have a real community, that you have children seeing the whole arc of life instead of these confined little snapshots we tend to build for ourselves.
Well, I think, one of the things that I've been on a campaign for a long time is changing the way that we see aging.
Oh,
That instead of
absolutely.
it being something to be dreaded, ignored,
It's an opportunity.
avoided,
Yeah.
Botoxed away, that
Yeah,
that
exactly.
it really is a time to embrace, because there are so many things that you can do that you couldn't do before,
Exactly.
and the wisdom. And so,
Yes.
Sure,
I
of
think we've
course.
seen that with those of us that have had grandparents, parents and children, or grandparents and children, that the wisdom and the experience that can be passed along when you live nearby.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tom, I know that you've also had a long-standing commitment to sustainability.
Oh, absolutely.
How are you finding these two interests fitting together?
Well, principally, we were working very hard on making homes more energy efficient, which means if you can make your house better insulated and better air sealed so that the wind doesn't blow all the heat out, and make sure that your furnaces are very functional and high efficiency, you can save a lot of money on your heating bills, and you can be much more comfortable in your home. So now if you add to the fact that you're going to renovate your home and you're going to be staying there for maybe 20, 30, 40 years, and you can save a couple $1,000s a year in your heating bill over 40 years, that turns out to be some very significant money, especially because as we know, energy rates are rising. So when you combine the age-in-place principles of we're going to stay in our house for a long period of time with energy efficiency and also using building materials that are very healthful or don't have a detrimental effect, by living in the house, you get this combination that's really, really beneficial for the family. A really fantastic place to live, low energy costs, increasing savings with your whole family around in an independent way. It's very, very compelling, and it's really the way that our society is going. We must be much more energy efficient, partly to protect the environment for our grandchildren and beyond. So yeah, those two things work together very, very well.
Sounds very exciting.
We also contribute, though, with sustainability to staying in your home. Anytime we can use our existing house stock as opposed to building new, we're saving resources. We are the greenest, most sustainable thing you can do is use your existing home, stay in your existing home, and not build new. We don't want to take up more land. We have plenty of houses. We really have a lot of houses to fill before it becomes a problem that we need to build new ones. And so aging in place is also one of those ways of extending the value of the existing house stock. It's very important for us to do this as a country, as a planet.
Is there something in your work in this area that is a really exciting new development, or a surprise that you discovered
I think
in
what's
digging
really
into it
exciting,
deeper?
I think what's really exciting is that people are becoming more aware of the resources that are available, like through your organization or through the home builders or our NARI chapter, or just the talks that Cathy and I give, or articles that we write about things like that. That people are much more open to, thinking about their future in a group, their group family, and to thinking about shared resources and thinking about the wider community so that they can really participate to the fullest, throughout their life and not feel trapped in their home or, trapped in a disability where they, could have done something but now they can't. So, yeah, it's a very exciting time. Very exciting.
Great.
Well, it's also exciting with all the technologies coming up now. My mother, who is 78, spends all her time on the internet. There are new technologies in the home, lighting, path lighting at the touch of a button that are very inexpensive. You can literally have night lights that go from your bed to your bathroom at night, and that it's so important for people to have that safety feature, as well as, say, the call buttons,
Right.
the things to help if something does happen. The technology is getting better every single day.
That's great. Well, I know, Tom, that your company, Thomas G. Wells Construction, will put your information up at the end
Yeah,
of the show. You
definitely.
work in both New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And, I thank you for coming on today and talking about this, because I think it's a really important area for all of us of any age to think about. As you say, for our parents, for ourselves, for our children, you don't want it to be a barrier to having a guest in your home.
Exactly.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you,
Thank
Susan.
you.